big pleasure to be with you here and to be sharing with you, talking with you about this very sacred subject of karma. And this talk is really about karma as an engine of transformation, specifically in our relationships, since for many of us, the questions that come up around karma are very often the questions about relationships, at least if you're anything like me. So the word karma comes from the Sanskrit root kra, which means action. And a karma is any action that you're performing with your body, with your mind, and with your speech. And it also means, of course, the stored results and effects of past actions and thoughts, especially, and their present and past effects. And we'll talk a little bit about the different types of karma. One of the misunderstandings that we sometimes have about karma is that it's not just effective in terms of our personal lives, but that somehow the collective karmas that we get caught up in are also the results of our actions. But it's very important to understand with the recognition of the importance of cause and effect, the law of karma as cause and effect, that there is personal karma, there's collective karma, and there's what's called the karma of nature, the karma that actually is utterly impersonal and that happens as the result of natural causes, although of course nowadays there's a big question about what the effect of human beings is on the natural karmas. So the understanding of the law of karma is, first of all, cause and effect, but karma is really the law of evolutionary causality, and it's a very profound concept to understand. It's because of the law of karma, which flows in the universe in much the same way as the law of gravity or the laws of thermodynamics. The law of cause and effect is a natural law. And what it essentially says is that actions have consequences, but the corollary to it is, as Krishna very famously says in the Bhagavad-Gita, karma is mysterious. Krishna actually says, mysterious are the ways of karma. So we never know what the effects of our actions are going to be. We actually, despite the power of the law of cause and effect, it is actually impossible to predict the outcome of anything we do. All we can do is to enact our karmas with, and this is part of what the yogic texts tell us, with a fundamentally positive motivation. Because in terms of personal karma, the way in which we experience the fruits of our actions, and we'll get into that in a few minutes, has everything to do with the motives with which we perform them. And the second sort of important aspect of karma as a phenomenon is that our personal karmas, that is what's sometimes called the binding effects of actions, starts with at the root of our fundamental feeling of separation. So in any moment that we feel that we're separate from the universe, separate from each other, that we're a separate individual performing actions for the sake of outcome, then we're subject to the binding power of karma. And through our understanding of brain science, we've come to see what to me is a totally revolutionary fact, that, for example, right now I just raised my arm, and I'm conscious that about 30 seconds ago, I had the impulse to raise my arm. But if somebody did a brain scan, and you may know this on me, they would see that the action of raising my arm actually began 5 or 6 seconds before I even consciously thought of it. So in other words, the actions that we do with our body, certainly with our body, and often with our speech, and certainly with our mind, because how many times have you thought something that you wished you hadn't thought, but you had absolutely no control over it, it just arose. Part of what Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita is that if you really understand how things happen, you see that you cannot help performing action. Your arm will raise itself through the through the power of a deep intention that you may not be consciously aware of. Through the neuronal firing of your brain and nervous system. And if you've ever had the experience of being in the zone, how many of you have had that experience where, suddenly you're running and something is running you. It's no longer a big effort. The strides are coming on their own. It happens quite often in yoga that suddenly your vinyasa just takes off and it's, the pain in your body is gone. It's just happening. Or, perhaps you find yourself saying something that's so brilliant that you don't know where it came from. So this is, when we have this experience that Billie Jean King years ago called the zone, it actually is an experience of the fact that action can take place through this body, mind, and speech, powered by a force that's deeper and subtler than ourselves, and that is actually the force of pure action, which is why one of the great teachings in yoga, the teaching of Karma Yoga, is that it is actually possible to perform actions without expectation of results, even without feeling that you're the performer of your actions. But assuming that we're in a normal human state and we're doing our best to get along in the world, and we have strong desires and we're subject to emotions, we want things, we don't want other things. We like some people, we don't like other people. Assuming that we're in this normal human state, we're going to perform actions that are going to leave traces in our consciousness. These traces are going to create effective impressions that in Sanskrit are called samskaras. The word samskara rhymes with samskars, and because English is a Sanskritic language, this is not a coincidence. Samskaras are literally the grooves left in consciousness now, in neuroscience terms. They're actually the shifts in our neuronal wiring that take place as a result of strong actions, especially the actions that are motivated by strong emotions, that have a lot of charge. These are the ones that leave the most lasting samskaras. But it seems that everything that occurs in our life, which is a sort of a mind-blowing thought, is actually stored in the brain. And some of you may know that in the 1950s, a brain surgeon named Warren Penfield was working with epileptics, and he would attach electrodes to their brains to do a certain procedure. And at one point, the patients would be conscious. A woman he was working with began to talk about about being 4 years old in her mother's kitchen. She was having a total sense memory of this moment, which she did not hold in her conscious memory at all, of the sun in her mother's kitchen, of the smell of whatever it was her mother was cooking, what she was wearing. She totally relived that memory, and Penfield realized and began to do some of the early experiments on what we now call implicit memory. That is, memories that are not conscious, but are there. And as we know about implicit memories, they guide our actions in ways that we may not have a choice about. So in other words, if your early childhood experience of mother was of the warmth and love of a nurturing feminine presence, then you're going to have a very different experience of yourself and of other women than if your early experience of mother was of a cold and depressed and unavailable feminine presence. Even though you may not consciously remember anything about that experience is going to be lodged in your neuronal structure, and it then becomes what we call a vasana. That's what the texts call a vasana, which is the energetic flavor of your personality. And one of the sort of amazing things about practicing yoga, about tuning into our subtle being, is that we actually begin to become energetically sensitive in a way that can be a very important part of our interrelational activity. For instance, when I look at you, I can't see all of you here, but I can see some of you. As I look at your faces, I get not just a sense of your features, but a certain kind of energy comes off of every one of you and every one of us. You know, some of us have a very light energy. For some of us, for whatever reason, there might be a kind of a heaviness. Some of us look very cheerful and happy, and some of us look a little bit sad. And it's not even necessarily on our faces. It really has to do with the energetic signature that surrounds us, which is the result of the vasanas, that is, the tendencies. The word vasana means fragrance. The fragrance of your karmic self, of your karmically determined self, is expressed in your energy signature. And part of what occurs to us as we as we really transform our karmas through yoga, and truly speaking, karma, the deep power of yoga is the power to transform our karmic imprint. You know, to literally transform the neurons in our brain through practices that change the karmic patterns that are in our physical, mental, and emotional system. Now, there are three major types of personal karma that are spoken about in the texts, and if you're interested in reading more about this, the core text for it is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. That essentially everything we understand from the yogic texts about karma is in the Yoga Sutra. And the kind of, you know, when we talk about this is my karma, I saw a woman this morning who had a beautiful black t-shirt on that said in big white letters, "My karma made me do it." So that kind of karma, the karma that we feel, you know, kind of propels us into situations that we may or may not have chosen, is known in Sanskrit as prarabdha karma, meaning the word prarabdha means destined. And your destined karma the analogy is often given of, you know, if you're on a journey, the food you take out, and you've taken a backpack with food in it, the food that you take out of your backpack in this lifetime is the it's the prarabdha karma, it's the destined karma. And your destined karma can be modified. This is very important, and it's one of the reasons we do yoga. But there are certain things that can't be changed. You know, for example, I would give anything to have my legs be about 2 inches longer and maybe an inch skinnier, but I'm never going to have longer legs than I have. You're never going to have different parents than your birth parents. Your basic constitution, your prakriti, as they say in Ayurveda, is something you come in with. And even though you can change your health through practice, to a certain extent, you know, there's so many things about your physical and emotional body that are kind of givens, that are your destiny. And then there are the subtler things, the events that come to us that we may not have chosen. And one of the questions that comes up often when we think about karma is, how do you know that something that happens in your life is destiny? How do you know that it's a piece of your prarabdha? And there are a few answers to it, but really the most accurate way to understand this, if you're looking back at things that occurred in your life, like, why did you go to the college you went to? If you went to college, why did you get that first job? If you look at those kind of seminal events in your life, what about the person you married? You will often see that they actually came to you almost unbidden. You know, there are certain things that we worked for, that we chose, that we desired, and there are other things, and maybe some of our destined karmas were also things we worked for and desired. But very often, if you look at a situation in your life, you see that there was actually nothing you could have done to prevent it happening. Do you know what I'm saying? My sort of overriding experience of this happened when I was quite young. I went to a college that neither my parents nor any of my friends thought I should go to, but I was kind of compelled to go there, and it was great. But in my senior year, I met a woman who came in as a freshman. I was the editor of the school paper. She became my kind of mentee, and we became good friends. At the end of that year, she got me a job on a prominent weekly newspaper in New York, which started my career as a journalist in a very powerful way. I introduced her to my beloved younger brother. They got married. 5 years later, they were driving to Mexico. She was driving. She swerved to avoid a dog. They went off the road and they were instantly killed. And the thing is that this event, which occurred when I was 25, totally changed my life. It's because of that event that I actually began deeply practicing on the spiritual path. So that meeting with Jeannie, which was her name, was probably the most transformative karmic event of my early years. And I think many of us have events like that in our life which come about through relationships which may have gone on in different forms for many, many lifetimes. So this brings us to the topic of karmic relationships, but let me just first take us through this chart. So the second type of karma is called in Sanskrit sanchita, which means stored. And these are the residual karmas remaining in your subtle body. Because the doctrine of karma really tells us that because we do so many actions, create so many impressions, because of our actions, they actually cannot all be played out in a single lifetime. And so we are born again and again in order to play out these different actions, desires, and of course to learn by experience and ultimately become enlightened through the action of karma. The really extraordinary truth about karma is contained in the third type, which is kriyaman, acting karma or active karma. It's what we're doing now. And there's a very powerful and important statement in one of the great texts of yoga. It's called the Yoga Vasishta. And in it, the sage says, past karma and personal effort are like two mighty beasts, two rams is the word he used. Those curly horned, bighorn sheep. And you know how two male rams will fight it out sometimes to the death during the rutting season. So your past karma and your present effort are like two rams fighting it out. The strongest one wins. And then he says in the next line, there is no power greater than right action in the present moment. And this is really this is the empowering sutra of yoga practice that we're starting to understand more and more through neuroscience. Now that we understand brain plasticity, we realize that the vasanas, the karmic traces that cause our suffering, that cause us to be stuck, that cause us to be doing the same thing over and over again, getting into the same screwed up relationships, getting angry about the same old things that we got angry at when we were 15. These can be changed through right action in the present moment. Right action being the actions that are undertaken with full awareness of the teachings of the truth, the teachings of freedom, the teachings of love, and the texts of yoga, the sages of yoga, and of many other spiritual traditions have actually given us teachings that are fairly universal about what kind of actions will tend to create not only positive traces, but also begin to create the experience of freedom, to begin to create a climate inside us that will allow us eventually to live in the zone, which is the state in which we are able to act fully with the inspiration of our deeper self. So we're going to close this part of the conversation with one practice that is perhaps the deepest practice for transforming our karmic brain states And that is the practice of chanting. The practice of chanting will actually begin to not just cut into, but eliminate, dissolve, clear karmic traces. And if there's one practice that's simple and easy and that can actually work powerfully when there's nothing else that you can do, it's the practice of chanting with the breath. So we're going to start with a breath, a very simple breath. You can close your eyes, and as you inhale, allow your head to turn towards the left. So you inhale over to the left, just turning your head like this, and then exhale to the right. As you inhale, turning your head to the left, imagine an incident that occurred in the last week that felt painful or charged or where you wished you had acted differently. Inhale it, and then exhale with a sense that with the exhaled breath, you're breathing it out of your field. So we'll just do that for a moment. And then inhale with the thought Om, and exhale with the thought Om. Having the feeling that as you inhale, bringing your head over to the left, you're actually offering this event into the vibration of the mantra, and as you exhale, you're feeling the power of Om carrying that binding activity, that painful thought out of your field. You can bring your head back to center. We're going to speak now about some of the practices for working with karmic relationships. And I just want to begin by saying a little bit about what a karmic relationship, what the effect of karmic relationships really are in our lives. How many of you feel that there are people in your life that you're entangled with, that you're stuck to, that you're kind of karmically connected with, that feel, okay, so we'll take it one more step. How many of these karmic relationships feel positive? How many of them feel not so positive? Yeah, it's got sort of an equal number of both. And of course, then there's how many of them feel mixed? Yeah, so I think we can all raise our hands to this. Because we live in a state of total interdependence in this universe. There's an amazing radical statement that understanding that physicists came to sometime in the 70s. This factoid that a butterfly flapping his wings in Hong Kong can be the cause of a hurricane in the South Atlantic. If there was ever a statement about interdependence, it's that. So, in other words, this universe lives on a web of relationships, and you yourself live in a web of relationships. And some of these relationships are powerfully facilitative in positive ways. Some of them not so much. One of the questions that comes up often in the conversations between gurus and disciples in the yogic texts is the question of, why do I have this person who's an enemy to me, who's done so many nasty things to me? Why am I in love with this woman who's married to somebody else? Why am I so powerfully drawn to some people and so powerfully repelled by others? And then the deeper question, why is it that my relationships don't work out? Which so many of us have that question. Why is it that I don't feel that that I can be peaceful in my relationships, even with the people I love? Why is it that, that someone I love so much is having such a hard time in life and there's nothing I can do about it? Have you ever had any of those questions? So the answer to many of these questions is that it really has to do with the residues of the past actions that we have committed, the past thoughts that we've had in relationship in general and with that other person. For example, many of us have gone lifetime after lifetime searching for the perfect romantic partnership. and we often come into this life with a longing for some kind of ideal partnership. And it may be that, that in our past life, or even in this life, we've entered into relationships that, let's say they were karmically complex or not necessarily in our best interest. And it's something I've seen for years in my life in spiritual communities, that you'll be in a yoga retreat and you'll see somebody sitting next to you or across the room, and there'll be this powerful feeling of attraction to that person, you know what I mean? It's like, and there you are in this yoga atmosphere, and the energy is very strong, and you look at them and your love is in your heart, and you you project that love onto that person, you go, oh my God, maybe this is the one. And you get into conversation, you find out that person is in a long-term relationship with somebody else, or maybe you're in a long-term relationship with somebody else, but you allow yourself to be drawn by that attraction, and you get into, you hook up with that person, and then the consequences of that hookup can be many. I mean, it can become a problem in your long-term relationship, in the other person's long-term relationship. You can find out that they actually cause pain to you, and you wonder, so what was that attraction? Why was I so attracted to that person when it didn't necessarily have the best consequences? Sometimes it does. I have friends who met at Burning Man who are who have been ecstatically happy ever since. So it's not that those hookups aren't often profoundly positive, but very often they're not. And we wonder, how can this happen? I'm in a spiritual place. My heart is open. So one of the teachings of the text of karma is that when we're drawn to another person, 9 times out of 10, it's because we have a debt, either us to them or them to us. And in other words, very often when you fall in love with somebody, it's because the only way the universe could get you to stick together long enough to work out your debt is if you fall in love. So, and if you think back on your life, you may see that there are situations like that. There are a couple of people shaking their heads and smiling. And the story that I've heard about this that made the most lasting impression on me was told to me by a Swiss actress that I knew years ago, and she was 22. She was in a repertory company in Bern, and she saw this guy walking across the courtyard, and she had this terrible feeling of foreboding when she saw him. And he came in. It turned out he was a new hire. He was an actor. They found they had a lot in common. Eventually, they fell in love. Eventually, they got married. They were married for 10 years. He slept with her friends. He got her into contracts that were very bad for her financially. The relationship was incredibly destructive for her. And that's just her side of the story, but I don't know what his experience was. And she couldn't get away from it. And one day she actually met a spiritual teacher in Bern, and she went to a retreat. And she asked him the question, what is it that's holding me to my husband? And he didn't answer in words, but that weekend she had a series of meditation experiences in which she saw them together in the costumes of different times and places, and she saw him. She saw herself in a medieval clothes, massively pregnant. This man in a different, coming in, having apparently come home from a war where he'd been away for 2 or 3 years, seeing her pregnant with a child that wasn't his and killing her. She saw another situation in which they were business partners and she cheated him out of a large sum of money. And she saw this thread of connection, which had both given her this sense of, oh my God, this person, that foreboding that she'd had when she first met him, and then the infatuation that kept them together. So very often we don't know what the threads are that draw us together with someone. But the thing about a karmic relationship is that very often we feel that there's not a choice. In other words, this person looms so large in our consciousness that we cannot avoid being in some kind of relationship with him or her, which may be professional, it may be personal. But we're going to do a practice in the time we have that's I have found to be the most skillful practice I know for actually working with karmic relationships and actually turning the negative parts of them into instructive and helpful parts of them. And I just want to start it with a story. It's a story from the Tibetan tradition. And it's a story about a certain kind of karmic relationship. And the story goes that on a certain full moon night in the high Himalayas, around a lake, suddenly a group of owls comes and sits on the trees around the lake. And at the same time, a group of freshwater seals come into the lake. And the seals begin catching fish in the lake and throwing them to the owls in the trees. The owls eat the fish, and then they open their beaks and call for more. All night long as the moon is full, the seals keep throwing the fish, the owls keep eating it. The owls are never satisfied, and the fish never stop trying to feed the owls. And this story illustrates a particular kind of karmic relationship in which there's a sense of obligation. And you may know someone like this. You know, I mean, it could be the friend who calls you up every week with a new problem, and you feel like you have to listen, or it might be a member of your family who's an addict, whom you cannot keep yourself from supporting, no matter what they do, or it might be a boss who makes impossible demands of you, but you feel that you have to fulfill them, not only because that person is your boss, but because there's a pull inside you. And one of the ways we know that it's this kind of relationship is that the person you feel the obligation to is never satisfied. It's never enough. Do you know what I'm saying? So how do you transform such a relationship, such a karma? And the way we do this with relationships actually helps us with everything about our entangled lives. So we're going to do this practice. I'm going to tell you about it, guide you in it, and then we'll see what happens. So this is a practice that's both shamanic and yogic. It's the practice of cutting cords. That if you understand the way energetic connections work, you know that between all of us, for instance, all of us in this room, there are some energetic threads that have come between us because I'm giving you my attention and you're giving me your attention. In close relationships, those energetic threads get very, very thick and very strong, very, very, very solid in a certain way. And if you look at the way energetic threads work, what you'll often see is that when you feel love for somebody, or you want something from somebody, or you want to feel connected, you will literally, some of us are more sensitive to this than others, you will send out an energetic ray towards that person. And you'll see it a lot in yoga classes. People are sitting there with the teacher and they're sending rays towards that teacher, saying, notice me, help me, love me. But it's very obvious in our relationships with our parents, with our children, especially with our lovers, that the more we want to be connected And the more they want to be connected to us, the more threads or cords, as they're sometimes called, are set out. So often in a relationship, there's so many cords between us that we are almost forced to behave in ways that are painful, that leave us feeling entangled, not free, that cause resentment. So in this practice, we choose a person whom we feel that kind of corded, entangled relationship with. It can be someone very close to us or someone not so close, but where you feel that threads of energy have gone between you that are not necessarily so healthy, let's say. And what we're going to do is cut them or pull them out. And as you'll see that as you start doing this practice, it sort of takes on its own life. So close your eyes. Find a comfortable posture, and if you want to keep something to write with close to you, you might find that an insight arises that you want to record. And imagine somebody that you want to work with. Someone that you feel the relationship is overly entangled, or that you'd like to be free from, or someone whom you really love, where it doesn't feel as though things are completely clear. Or it can be, and often is, a parent or a child or someone you work with. And once you've found the person, now feel that you actually summon this person, almost like calling an avatar of this person to sit with you, to sit in front of you. And if you're not a skilled visualizer, just know it's not necessary to actually imagine this person visually. You can just have a sense of their energetic presence. And if it's someone you know well, you probably have a strong sense of what their energy current feels like. So feel that person is sitting with you, sitting in front of you, and begin to notice the energetic threads that connect you, the cords that connect you. Now, imagine yourself, you can do this in several ways. You can imagine yourself taking a pair of shears, of scissors, and literally cutting through, slicing through the cords. Or you could imagine yourself pulling them out of your body, almost as though they had suction cups on the end. And when you pull them out, just let them go. If that's the case, I often imagine these cords as kind of being like bungee cords, that if I pull them out of myself, even though they may still be in the other person, that the action of my pulling them out of myself or cutting them will actually start to dissolve the connection from the other person's point of view as well. So just let yourself notice all the cords that you can find and cut them or pull them out. And for some of you, it may feel as though this is happening very easily, and for some of you, they may feel quite thick and entangled. It may not be so easy, but just keep doing it, pulling the cords out. Understanding that this kind of subtle action is very, very powerful on the energetic level. Now I'm continuing to feel this person's energetic avatar, as it were, sitting in front of you. Find yourself with a flower in your hand and offer it to this person. And imagine them taking it, receiving it. The flower is, in the subtle world, it's a symbolic gesture of your intent for peace and harmony and friendship with this person. And as you offer them the flower, say to them, in the future, I would like our relationship to be not entangled, but to move forward with love and freedom. I would like our relationship to be not entangled, but to move forward with love and freedom. And notice as you say this, as you offer this person the flower, just notice what the effect is, whether they seem to receive it, or just notice how it feels in this moment between you. And you can open your eyes. If there's something you want to write down, you can write it down. And just be aware of the feelings that are there. For some of you, this may have been very deep. For some of you, not quite so deep. But if there are emotions coming up, if there are insights coming up, be aware of them. And understand also that this practice is not something to do just once. It's something to take with you and really work with over time, with people that you love and the people that you don't love. And to know that the more you practice it, the more that wish for freedom and love in relationships will become actual for you. Thank you.